Every real estate guru claims their strategy is the best. Airbnb gurus say short-term rentals are the future. Wholesaling gurus promise quick cash with no money down. Fix and flip experts show you their latest check with $50,000 in profit. But which strategies actually deliver the best results? Today I'm ranking every major real estate investment strategy based on 7 critical factors. I own 153 Section 8 rental properties generating $200,000 in monthly income. But I've also dabbled in all of these other investment strategies. And today, I'm gonna give you my honest assessment of each individual one. The good, the bad, and the ugly. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which investment strategy makes the most sense for your specific situation. And before we dive into the rankings, let me explain the 7 factors I'm using to evaluate these strategies. The first thing is gonna be your risk level. Level 1 risk virtually means there's no risk of losing money, and level 10 means a high chance of significant loss. The factors are going to be market dependency, tenant risk, and economic sensitivity. Number 2 is going to be capital requirements. Basically, how much you need to get started with this business model, including down payments, renovation, and operational costs. This ranges anywhere from $0 to over $100,000 plus. Factor number 3 is going to be your time investment. Basically, how much ongoing work is required. Whether it's active, meaning there's daily involvement required, whether it's passive, meaning there's very minimal effort required by the investor, or semi-passive, meaning regular involvement. Number 4 is going to be your cash flow potential, meaning your monthly income generation capability, your consistency and your predictability of your income, and the ability to replace your W-2 from this business model. Number 5 is going to be the scalability factor. How easy can you go from 1 to 10 plus deals? Your capital efficiency for growth with that business model, and the systems and processes required to be able to scale. Number 6 is going to be your recession-proof rating. 1 equals getting destroyed by economic downturns, and 10 meaning actual benefits from recessions. And we're going to be basing this off of historical performance with that business model. And finally, factor number 7 is going to be beginner friendliness. 1 equals years of experience and expertise. 10 equals complete beginners can succeed with this model. Now let's rank each strategy using this criteria. The first business model we're going to go ahead and talk about is going to be Airbnb and short-term rentals. In terms of your risk level on this business model, I would give this roughly 8 or a 9 out of 10. The reason for that is just for the fact that it's super market dependent. You may not have a super high occupancy rate with these Airbnbs if they're not set up correctly. I've seen a ton of investors actually get flagged on Airbnb, which completely ruin their revenue, and it's extremely market sensitive. If we're in times of a recession where people have less and less money, you better believe they're probably not going to be renting your Airbnb for the night. In terms of your risk level, I would give this an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Now let's talk about your capital requirements for Airbnb. I've personally never seen anyone get started with an Airbnb with less than $50,000 to $100,000 out of pocket. Now it is going to be dependent on whether or not you actually purchase the property itself or you're just subleasing, but regardless, subleasing is overplayed. There are minimal margins, and you still do ultimately have to furnish the property for the most part. In addition to that, most landlords are not even allowing subleasing anymore on their properties. So in terms of your minimum capital investment for Airbnbs, you're going to need at least $25,000 to $30,000 just to get started. And that's going to be furnishing the property, maintaining cleaners, advertising the property, and continuously scaling. Now let's talk about your time investment with Airbnbs. In my opinion, I would call this an active business model because you do have to check up on your cleaners daily. You do have to check up on your management company to ensure they're actually renting this property out. And to find one of these Airbnb properties, I've seen it take months and months for investors to even locate one that's feasible. So at bare minimum, I would say this is semi-passive, but it's really more so of an active business model. Now in terms of your cash flow potential with Airbnbs, there is a ton. You could actually make 2 times more than long-term rentals, but it is extremely market dependent. For example, I would say it's very dependent on seasonality, local tourism trends, guest reviews, and sometimes the city could even ban Airbnb. Now, could you replace your W-2 with Airbnb? It is possible, but it's going to require active management, or you're going to end up spending 10 to 20% on Airbnb management. You definitely need at least 3 to 5 units units depending on location and expenses. Now let's talk about the scalability factor with Airbnb. I would say that it's relatively difficult. Each additional unit adds complexity. You gotta worry about cleaning, guests, turnovers, maintenance on every single unit. And the reality is, more units equals more city-specific regulations and potential permit challenges. Now your capital efficiency for growth, I would put that at low to medium. There's a ton of high upfront costs, like putting your first and last month's rent. Furniture could cost you anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. You have to have setup, cleaning, photography. Now you could scale with rental arbitrage, but those come with risk and tighter margin. Now in terms of the systems and processes required, you need automated messaging and guest screening. You need to have your cleaning and your turnovers in place. You need to have pricing optimization depending on the season. You need to have your maintenance team on lockdown. So in terms of being able to scale Airbnbs, I would put it at very difficult. Now let's talk about the recession-proof rating. Personally, I would put this at a 3 out of 10. The reason that it scores low is because travel is discretionary. During recessions, people cut travel first. The 2020 COVID crash, Airbnb dropped by 80% in revenue in just a few weeks. Relying on short-term travelers is extremely vulnerable. And honestly, a ton of current Airbnb hosts actually shifted to mid-term rentals. Now, in terms of beginner friendliness, I would give this a 5 out of 10. It is relatively easy to start, but it does have high risk and extremely costly mistakes. One bad review can literally tank your listing. And honestly, because of all of these factors that I just mentioned, I would give Airbnb probably a C tier rating. It has high income potential, but it's not passive. There's a huge seasonality risk. It is potentially scalable, but it is operationally intensive. Now, the second business model we're gonna talk about right now is gonna be real estate wholesaling. In terms of your risk level, I would give this a 2 out of 10, which is relatively low. The reason for that is because there's no property ownership, you don't have to worry about tenants, and you don't have to worry about your mortgages. There's minimal capital required because it's just marketing and time. And if a deal doesn't sell, well, the worst case scenario is you lose a few $100. The real biggest risk with wholesaling is really just a reputational risk. If you back out of deals or if you end up failing to close, well, a lot of sellers are not gonna wanna work with you. Now, in terms of your capital requirements, I would say you can get started with less than $5,000. You have no down payments and you don't have renovations on these properties because you're just assigning a contract. You could actually get started with free marketing if you wanted to, just pick up the phone and start dialing. And it's relatively cheap to get lists or skip trace addresses for wholesaling. Now let's talk about your time investment with wholesaling. Is this a passive, semi-passive, or is this an active income? I would without a doubt call wholesaling an active income. It requires you daily effort. You gotta follow up with your leads. You gotta reach out to landlords. You gotta talk to sellers, reach out to your cold calling team. It's literally very highly dependent on your hustle and your consistency. And if you don't have any deals, well, guess what? You don't have any income. Now let's talk about your cash flow potential with wholesaling. Your monthly income could fluctuate. It's ultimately just gonna depend on whether or not you're closing deals. I've seen wholesalers do $0 a month consistently throughout the year, and I've also seen wholesalers that make 6 figures a month. But I will say it is an extremely competitive business model as of now. And in terms of your consistency, I would say it's relatively low. There's months where wholesalers make a few $1,000s a month and actually go negative, and there's months where wholesalers make $10,000 or $20,000 on just one deal. Now let's rate your wholesaling scalability. I would probably give this somewhere around a 6 or 7 out of 10. You could go from 1 to 10 deals relatively quick if you have a solid team in place. The only problem with this is I've seen many wholesalers go under just for the fact that they have a ton of different subscriptions, and if they don't close any deals that month, well, they're in the negative. Now let's give this a recession-proof rating out of 10. I would probably rate this right around a 5 or 6. And the reason for that is because motivated sellers increase in downturns, so there's definitely a lot more opportunities for wholesalers during a recession, but the problem is there's much less cash buyers in a recession. Now let's talk about your beginner friendliness. I would probably give this somewhere around a 5 or 6 out of 10. It's a low cost to start and you don't need any license to get started, but there is going to be a relatively steep learning curve. You need to learn about contracts. You need to learn how to run your comps on a property. You need to learn how to speak to realtors, the terminology, all of that good stuff as you're getting started. And mistakes like bad deals or legal slip-ups can cost you thousands of dollars, and you you wouldn't even know it. So for wholesaling, honestly, I would give this a B tier rating. It has a low startup cost and it has a high upside. It is scalable with systems, but it is not a passive business model whatsoever. It is beginner friendly, but it is not easy. And in 2025, I would say this is one of the most saturated business models that's out there. Now let's talk about fix and flips. In terms of risk level, I would probably give this business model a 9 out of 10. And the reason for that is that market timing is very, very important. A downturn in the market could literally wipe out all of your profits. There's renovation risks dealing with contractors, inspectors, agents, different buyers. And there's a ton of holding costs. You have loan payments, you have insurance, you have your taxes. There's a ton of things that go into it that'll slow down the process. It is going to be a relatively high reward just depending on the deal, but it is a high risk as well. One bad deal alone can wipe out a year of profit. In terms of your capital requirements, you're going to need a minimum of $50,000 to $100,000 just to do your first deal. Your down payment is going to be anywhere from 10 to 20%, and that's even with a hard money lender. Your rehab costs are going to be anywhere from $20,000 to $80,000 plus, and you need to have holding and reserve capital for insurance, taxes, utilities, etc. So you need serious cash to be able to jump into this business model, and that's even for a relatively small deal. Now let's talk about your time investment for fix and flip deals. Is this an active, passive, or semi-passive business model? I would personally say 100% without a doubt this is an active business model. It requires daily involvement, acquisitions, project management, and dispoing the deal itself. You gotta manage contractors, timelines, budgets, and you gotta worry about listings. So it's extremely hands-on from start to finish. Now let's talk about your cash flow potential from these fix and flip deals. Per deal, you can ultimately make anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000 plus if done right. But the consistency, I would say, is relatively low. It takes months, and these are not guaranteed to sell. I've seen deals sit on the market for months and months and investors lose tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars with fix and flip. So can you replace your W-2 income with this? Well, you can, but you need to have the expertise and you need to have done it multiple times before. Now let's talk about scalability with fix and flips. I would say it's medium to hard because you need a strong team to be able to scale this. You need to have multiple different pieces in place. You need to be able to trust your contractors, the bank, the lenders, all of that good stuff in between. And your capital efficiency, honestly, I would say is extremely low. You're tying up a lot of money just for one deal to go through. So it is possible to scale, but it is very capital intensive with these deals. And most flippers end up burning out before they could even scale. Now, in terms of a recession-proof rating, I would give this a 2 out of 10. Home values drop extremely fast in a recession, especially luxury homes. Buyers dry up, especially for retail price flips. So in summary, during a recession, you see a lot of flippers stop just because ultimately nobody wants to sit on a property for months and months without it being sold. And in terms of your beginner friendliness, I would 100% give this somewhere around a 2 to a 3 out of 10. There's an extremely steep learning curve. You need to know how to rehab these properties. You need to know how to comp these properties. You need to know how to find lenders, find contractors, find a realtor that you trust that could actually sell the property. You need to get permits as well. And one bad flip, well, you're shit out of luck with $20,000, $50,000. So I would say this is not beginner friendly whatsoever in terms of getting started. Now, in terms of rating this business model, whether it's S, A, B, C, or D, I would give this a D. And the reason for that is because it has high capital requirements, it's very active, and it's risky. Sure, you could make big profits on one deal, but then again, you also have the tax implication, and you pretty much have no tax savings unless you keep 1031ing. And the reality is, it's not very easy to scale with fix and flips. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is going to be traditional long-term rentals. I would give this a risk level of about a 4 out of 10. There's generally going to be a stable and consistent demand for housing, and it's much less impact than short-term housing in terms of a recession, but there are some risks that still exist. Market downturns can actually reduce your rent. You could have vacancies that could last months and months, and sometimes eviction costs could stack up. Now, let's talk about your capital requirements with with traditional rentals? I would say somewhere around $5,000 to $20,000 plus. You could actually close on your first deal with 5, 10, 15, even 20% down if you're utilizing seller financing, or you could even go the FHA route and live in one of the rentals and rent out the other 3. Now let's talk about your time investment with long-term rentals. I would probably give this a rating of passive / semi-passive, but that's going to be dependent on the specific investor. Once the property is rented, there's practically minimal monthly effort, and I would say there's occasional check-ins with your property manager, just depending on whether or not there's a high vacancy rate with that specific property. And generally, there is low maintenance if it's managed well, and it's great for those who want steady income with light oversight. Now let's talk about your monthly cash flow potential. You could generally make anywhere from $200 to $400 a month per door. The consistency is generally relatively high if you vetted your tenants properly prior, and yes, you could replace your W-2 income, but that would be dependent on you being able to scale. Now, the scalability factor for these specific deals, I would give it an easy, especially with DSCR loans right now. There is no minimum requirement in terms of real estate experience, and there's no limit on how many properties you can actually close on. But it is going to require you to have the proper systems in place, whether that's leasing, that's going to be maintenance, management, property managers, teams, all of that good stuff in place. And the capital efficiency, I would say, is pretty solid. You're only putting about 15, maybe 20 or 25% down per deal. Now, in terms of your recession-proof rating, I would probably give this one somewhere around a 5 to a 6 out of 10. Now, it is true that people always need housing, but if you think about what happened during COVID, a lot of landlords were having to go through the eviction moratorium, and a lot of landlords were not getting paid every single month. And finally, in terms of beginner friendliness with this business model, I would give it somewhere around a 7 out of 10. It's generally easy model. You buy, rent, and collect. There's a ton of resources that can get you turnkey properties, whether it's realtors. And honestly, the biggest mistakes that come with this business model are buying in the wrong area, as well as not screening your tenants correctly. Now, for this business model specifically, I would probably give it either an A or a B tier, but I'm probably leaning closer to an A tier. Now, let's talk about new construction buildings. In terms of your risk level, I would probably give this somewhere around a 10 out of 10. It is very, very market dependent, which means that market crashes could actually kill demand and your margins. There's material and labor cost volatility. As we know, during COVID, lumber prices actually 3, 4, and sometimes even 5x in some markets. You have delays such as permitting, contractors not performing, unlicensed contractors, potential lawsuits later on, and there's high carrying costs until you actually sell the property itself. There is a big potential for profit, but it is also an extremely high risk. Now let's talk about your capital requirements for construction. I would say they're probably going to be the highest out of all of these business models. You need a minimum of $100,000 all the way up to $1 million plus. The reason for that is because land acquisition. You need to get permits, you need to work with architects, and you need to work with engineers. There's construction draws, materials, labor, contractors, and you need to have capital for reserve and potential delays. So it's one of the most capital intensive real estate business models. Now let's talk about your time investment with construction. I would say this is another active business model. It requires daily oversight of contractors, timelines, budgets, and permits, and it's constant problem solving and coordination. And it's extremely hands-on unless you hire a full-time development team, but in that case, you're probably cutting out most of your margins. Now let's talk about your cash flow potential. Well, in terms of monthly cash flow, there's actually zero until the project actually sells. And in terms of consistency, well, it's relatively low as well. It could take years until that one deal sells. It is high profit per deal, but there's no monthly cash flow and no guarantee. Now let's talk about the scalability factor with construction. I would say it's relatively low as well. Unless you have extremely deep pockets and a strong team in the back end, you're probably not going to do many more than maybe a few deals, if that, per year. In terms of your capital efficiency, once again, extremely low. You're tying up hundreds of thousands of dollars just for one deal to go through. So can you scale? Well, technically yes, but you need hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. And for construction, on a recession-proof rating, I would give this a 1 out of 10. New builds yields historically slow down dramatically in times of a recession. Buyers and lenders actually end up pulling back, and high holding costs could become dangerous if demand drops. So this is an extremely vulnerable business model during recessions. And in terms of beginner friendliness, I'll also give this a 1 out of 10. It's a complex, high stakes business model. You need zoning, permitting, budgets, and you need the contractors all aligned. And there is a very low mistake tolerance. One single error with a new construction can cost you 6 figures or more. So this is not a beginner friendly business model whatsoever. So for me personally, I'm gonna have to give this business model a D rating. And the reason for that is because massive capital and time investment. No cash flow whatsoever until the property sells. It's not beginner friendly. There is high profit potential if done correctly, but then again, there's huge tax implications. And last but definitely not least, let's talk about Section 8 investing. I would probably give this a risk level of a 2 out of 10. It's government-backed rent, which means it's guaranteed even during a recession. There's less tenant payment risk because it's 70 to 100% from the government. And it's recession resistant just because demand ultimately increases in tough economies. And what can go wrong with this business model? Well, I would say the biggest factor is going to be tenant screening. Because if you don't screen your tenants correctly, you could have a ton of property damage. In addition to that, it is inspection failures. A ton of landlords don't necessarily know how to pass a Section 8 inspection, which end up costing thousands of dollars. So it is low financial risk, but that's only if managed well and done correctly. Now, in terms of your capital requirements, I would say it could range anywhere from a few $1,000s to maybe $15,000. I actually purchased my first Section 8 rental with $5,000 down. Generally, the houses that I'm buying are completely turnkey sub $100,000 in the Midwest and the Southeast. So you can actually seller finance these deals with $0 down, or you could do a DSCR loan with 15 or 20% down. So generally, your down payments are gonna range anywhere from $8,000 to $15,000 down per property. Now let's talk about your time investment with this business model. I would rate this as a passive business model if set up correctly. And I have my property managers take care of everything, including the inspection, tenant placement, leasing, all of that good stuff. So I'm more so the investor in the back end. The only thing that I'm focused on personally is more so just gonna be the acquisitions in terms of making the offers and signing the documents on Zoom. So this is gonna be the most passive you can get out of all of the business models. Now let's talk about your cash flow potential for Section 8 rentals. On a $70,000 property in Ohio, after all of my expenses with $15,000 down, I'm making anywhere from $500 to $800 every single month after all of my expenses. In terms of your consistency, it's extremely high. The government is guaranteeing you the payments every single month. And can you replace your W-2 income with a Section 8 rental? Well, I would say anywhere from 5 to 10 properties can completely replace your W-2 job. Now let's talk about the scalability factor with these Section 8 rentals. I would say it's extremely high in low cost markets. Your capital efficiency is extremely strong once again, considering these are turnkey properties and you could purchase them with as little as $5,000 down. And it's very scalable with the right systems and financing in place. Many investors can scale to 10 plus doors within just 12 months with the right systems and processes in place. Now let's talk about the recession-proof rating with Section 8. I would give this one a 10 out of 10. The reason for that is because the rent is guaranteed by the government, not the tenant every single month. And the crazy part is demand actually increases during a recession as more people make less and less money. So when traditional landlords are not getting their payments every single month, Section 8 landlords are getting a guaranteed check on the first. So this is one of the most recession-resistant business models on the market. And finally, let's talk about beginner friendliness. It's honestly a relatively simple business model. You buy the turnkey property sub $100,000 in Ohio, you fund the property using a DSCR loan, and you rent the property to a Section 8 tenant. And the reality is the mistake tolerance is actually higher because these are guaranteed payments every single month. The biggest thing you need to know how to understand is how to find the property, how to vet the property, how to get the right property manager, how to ultimately pass the Section A inspection, and learn how to go through the Section A paperwork. So it is great for beginners, but you need the right tools in place to be able to execute this. So in terms of Section A investing, I would give this business model an S tier. And the reason for that, once again, is because it's a recession-proof business model that is very low risk. It's scalable with seller financing, so it's not dependent on your credit score, and you could also utilize DSCR financing. It's beginner friendly and it's pretty passive. There's low upfront capital required and you're getting guaranteed monthly income. And in addition to that, you have a ton of tax benefits with this business model, utilizing cost segregation and 100% bonus depreciation. Now, after ranking each major real estate strategy, Section 8 stands alone at the top. It's the only strategy that combines high cash flow, low risk, passive management, and recession-proof income every single month. While other gurus promote flashy strategies that look good on social media, I focus on what actually builds long-term wealth with minimal investment. Plus, you get all the benefits of real estate ownership without the typical real estate risks. And if you want to learn how to build wealth using the highest ranked real estate strategy, check out the link in my description. I have a free training that's going to show you how to acquire your first Section 8 rental in the next 60 days. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.